I studied with Horowitz's student, Ivan Davis. Davis said that the piano you see Horowitz performing on was not a regulation piano. He had an action-adjusted instrument with a keyboard that's rigged so that the piano keys went down with almost no pressure applied to them at all. That makes it much easier to play than a standard piano. Horowitz was like a baseball player with a corked bat. Davis never knew how Horowitz rigged his keyboard, but I found out when I was about to perform my Piano Concerto No. 8 in New York. The piano at the concert hall wasn't good enough, so we had to bring in a rental. While I was picking out a piano in the basement of the Steinway 57th Street showroom, one of the technicians came up to me and asked if I studied with Horowitz's student. I indicated that I did. He then asked me if I knew about Horowitz's piano. He proceeded to tell me how they rigged his keyboard. Horowitz had the technicians file down the felt on the hammers. On a keyboard, you push the piano key down and the hammer goes up and hits the string. It's like a seesaw. This goes down, this goes up. If you reduce the weight on the hammer, the keys will go down very easily. Now the hammers are covered with thick felt that makes a beautiful sound when it hits the string. Horowitz had most of the felt removed from the hammers, which created an ugly metallic sound. The technician told him his piano sounded terrible, but he didn't care. Ivan Davis said that Horowitz had a deceptive personality. He couldn't get a straight answer from him about anything when he studied with him. When Horowitz came to Miami, he played a shell game with the notoriously difficult technique in Beethoven's Appassionata, leaving out 7.5 pages of the 15-page first movement. He basically played the easy parts and left out the hard parts. In the 1970s, the press made Horowitz their sacred cow, and they declared that his concerts were the greatest performances ever given. Actually, the greatest virtuoso back then was Martha Argerich. That's my opinion. It was also the opinion of Ivan Davis. Now, if you still believe in the false narratives that the press creates about classical music, if you still believe the New York Times always tells the truth, then let me just say this. It is scientifically impossible for a guy who's almost 80 years old to be the greatest in the world at something that requires athletic skill. The story about Horowitz, the trick piano, and the Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson has never been told. Here's what happened. Back then, everybody watched Johnny Carson. He had the #1 late night talk show for 30 years. It was great for classical piano because they booked 4 concert pianists a year. Horowitz tried to get on the show for years, but the booking always fell apart because he wanted to bring in his own piano and there wasn't room for it backstage. I know this because when I was on the Tonight Show, producer Freddie DeCordova told me all about what Horowitz did. Horowitz was finally given a booking after he agreed to perform on their piano. On the day of the performance, he didn't show up. He wasn't there for the sound check. His manager didn't even call. Freddie DeCordova, the producer, called Horowitz's manager and said, "Where's your guy?" Horowitz's manager said, "I have good news and bad news. The bad news is Horowitz really wants to perform on his own piano for sentimental reasons. The good news is I have the piano on a truck right outside NBC Studios. I can have it at the loading dock in 5 minutes. Horowitz will arrive with the piano." Now that's an iconic scene. The great deceptionist sitting in a truck with his trick piano waiting for NBC Studios to let him in so he could perform for the largest audience there is for a classical pianist. Freddie told Horowitz's manager, "That piano is not coming in and your guy is bumped from the show." I told Freddie all about Horowitz's trick piano and his history of deceptions. Freddie said, "I'm glad that guy never got on my show."